For 300 years they ruled with fearlessness. Their name alone struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. The Spartans' warriors forged not in the luxury of palaces, but in the fire of war. They were raised to kill, to conquer, and to die without fear. But what if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Sparta was a lie? Tonight we rip apart the myths and expose the brutal reality. Imagine a world where children were torn from their mothers at the age of 7, forced to fight, starve, steal, and kill. A society where warriors were trained like machines and women wielded power no other Greeks dared to grant. But were they truly history's greatest warriors or just master propagandists? Forget Hollywood's glorified image. This is the real story of Sparta. From their ruthless training in the Agoge to the blood-soaked fields of Thermopylae, from the oppression of the Helots to the shocking fall of their invincible empire. Did they really throw weak babies off cliffs? Were they noble heroes or brutal slave masters? And why did the greatest warrior society in history crumble into dust? Stay with me till the end, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the Spartans. Strap in. We're tearing open the darkest secrets of Sparta, and you will never see history the same way again. Chapter 1. The Birth of Sparta, the Origins of a Warrior Society, the Dorian Invasion, the warlike founders of Sparta. To understand Sparta's rise as one of the most feared military powers in history, we must go back nearly 3,000 years, to an age of chaos, conquest, and transformation. Sparta did not emerge overnight. It was born from blood, war, and the unrelenting brutality of its founders, the Dorians. The Dorians were not native to the lush lands of Laconia, where Sparta would later flourish. They were an aggressive, warlike people who swept down from the north, displacing the Mycenaean civilization that had once ruled the Greek world. Unlike the artistic and sophisticated Mycenaeans, the Dorians valued strength, discipline, and conquest above all else. They were warriors first, farmers second, and their entire existence revolved around the might of the spear. When they conquered the fertile lands of the Peloponnesus around the 10th century BCE, they found themselves ruling over a vast population of subjugated people, enslaved Mycenaeans, whom they called the Helots. This brutal conquest set the foundation for the Spartan way of life. In order to maintain control over the Helots, who vastly outnumbered them, the Dorians forged a system of governance and military discipline unlike anything the world had ever seen. They became warriors, not just by choice, but by necessity. And from this crucible of violence, Sparta was born. Lycurgus, the mysterious lawgiver who shaped Sparta's fate. Every great civilization has its legendary founders, and Sparta was no exception. At the heart of its creation stands one enigmatic figure, Lycurgus. But who was he? A man? A myth? A god? No one truly knows. His existence is shrouded in legend, his origins debated by historians. But what remains undeniable is the lasting impact of his laws that turned Sparta into a society built for war. According to ancient accounts, Lycurgus was the architect of the Spartan system. He traveled far and wide, studying the governments of different lands before returning to Sparta with a radical vision. He crafted a constitution that stripped away individual luxury, eliminated wealth disparities, and bound every Spartan to the service of the state. His reforms enforced discipline, military training, and absolute loyalty to Sparta. The weak were cast aside, the strong were molded into soldiers, and personal ambition was sacrificed for the collective. Perhaps the most extreme of his reforms was the Agoge, a brutal, state-controlled training system that took Spartan boys from their families at the age of 7 and turned them into hardened warriors. There was no room for weakness. They were starved, beaten, and forced to fight for survival. They were taught to endure pain without complaint, to steal without getting caught, and to kill without hesitation. Lycurgus did not just create laws, he created an unbreakable warrior state. But did Lycurgus truly exist? Or was he a symbol, a legend crafted by the Spartans to justify their extreme way of life? Regardless of the truth, his name became synonymous with Spartan discipline, and his laws remained unchallenged for centuries. The dual kingship, a kingdom with two kings unlike other Greek city-states, Sparta was not ruled by a single monarch. It had two kings simultaneously. A bizarre and unique system unheard of in most of the ancient world, but why? The origins of Sparta's dual kingship trace back to its earliest days. Legend states that two brothers, descendants of Hercules himself, founded the Spartan royal bloodlines, the Agiads and the Eurypontids. These two ruling families shared power, each providing a king to Sparta's throne. This system ensured that no single ruler could dominate the state, preventing tyranny while maintaining a balance of power. But make no mistake, these kings were not absolute rulers. They were more like military commanders, expected to lead Spartan armies in times of war. In political matters, their power was checked by a governing council, the Gerousia, and a group of 5 powerful officials known as the ephors. If a king was deemed unfit, he could even be removed. In Sparta, no one was above the state, not even its kings. This dual kingship was not just about politics. It was a reflection of Sparta's survival strategy. One king could lead the armies into battle while the other remained in Sparta to govern. It ensured continuity, stability, and most importantly, absolute military readiness. The Spartan way of life, a society built for war. To the outside world, Sparta was not just another Greek city, it was an anomaly. A city where art, philosophy, and wealth were scorned, and war was the only path to glory. Unlike Athens, which flourished with democracy, culture, and intellectual pursuits, Sparta was single-minded in its purpose, survival through strength. Spartan society was structured into 3 main classes. Number 1, the Spartiates, the warrior elite, full-blooded Spartans who trained for war and ruled over society. Number 2, the Perioeci, the middle class, responsible for trade, crafts, and economic activity. They were free but had no political power. Number 3, the Helots, the enslaved underclass, former Mycenaeans who worked the land and served the Spartan state. Their numbers dwarfed the Spartans, making them both the backbone of the economy and the greatest threat to Spartan stability. Life in Sparta was rigid, disciplined, and controlled by the state. Boys were raised not by their families, but by the Agoge. Women were expected to be strong, independent, and physically fit to give birth to future warriors. Wealth was irrelevant, luxury was forbidden. Everything revolved around war. But was this society truly invincible? Or was its foundation built on a fragile illusion, one that would eventually lead to its downfall? This is where our journey begins. This is the true story of Sparta. Chapter 2, the Agoge. The brutal training of Spartan warriors, the test of strength. Were weak Spartan babies really left to die? Sparta was not just a city, it was a machine designed to produce warriors, and like any machine, it discarded weak parts. From the moment of birth, a Spartan child's life was not their own. It belonged to the state. Unlike other Greek cities where families raised their children with care and affection, in Sparta, a newborn's fate was decided by cold calculation. Every Spartan baby was taken before a council of elders, hardened men who had dedicated their lives to war. The child was examined, inspected for defects, and tested for physical strength. If the infant showed any signs of weakness, if they were sickly, deformed, or even just too small, there was no mercy. They were abandoned on the slopes of Mount Taygetus, left to die in the elements. This was not seen as cruelty, it was efficiency. Sparta had no room for the weak. But did they truly throw infants off cliffs, as legends suggest? Modern historians debate this, but one thing is certain: the Spartans had no tolerance for anything less than perfection. Even those who were allowed to live were not safe from suffering. Their real test had only just begun. The Agoge. How Spartan boys were turned into fearless warriors. At the age of 7, a Spartan boy's childhood ended. He was ripped from his family, his mother's embrace replaced by the cold discipline of the state. He was now a recruit of the Agoge, the most ruthless training system in history. The Agoge did not just teach boys to fight. It broke them, reshaped them, and forged them into unfeeling warriors. Their days were filled with brutal drills, endless combat training, and extreme endurance tests. They were beaten daily, encouraged to fight one another, and taught to endure pain without flinching. crying was a disgrace. Complaining was weakness. Hunger was constant, but food was scarce, forcing boys to steal just to survive. If they were caught, they were not punished for stealing, they were punished for being caught. Their bodies were hardened by exposure to the elements, sleeping on reed mats without blankets, training barefoot in scorching summers and freezing winters. They were given a single cloak to last an entire year. Pain became their companion. Suffering became their teacher. The purpose of the Agoge was not just to build warriors, but to strip away fear, to turn boys into men who would rather die than surrender. And by the time they reached adulthood, those who survived had become something terrifying, unstoppable soldiers, bred for war and nothing else. The Crypteia, the Spartan secret police of death. But even among the elite, not all Spartans were equal. The most promising warriors, the strongest, the most ruthless, were chosen for a secret trial that separated the true Spartans from the rest. This was the Crypteia, a brutal rite of passage where young warriors were sent on a deadly mission to kill Helots in cold blood. The Helots were the enslaved class of Sparta, a people who vastly outnumbered their Spartan masters. They were the backbone of the Spartan economy, forced to work the fields, provide food, and serve the state. But they were also the greatest threat to Spartan rule. To keep them in fear, the Spartans used terror as a weapon. During the Crypteia, elite young warriors were sent into the countryside under cover of darkness. Their task? To hunt, stalk, and murder Helots, especially the strongest and most rebellious among them. Armed with only a dagger, they would hide in the shadows, striking suddenly, vanishing just as quickly. There was no remorse, no hesitation. This was their final test. If they survived, if they proved themselves worthy killers, they would return to Sparta as full citizens, true warriors of the state. But if they failed, they never returned at all. The final test. Killing to become a Spartan warrior. By the time a Spartan reached the age of 20, they had endured more suffering, pain, and discipline than most people could comprehend. But one final challenge remained, the ultimate test to prove they were worthy of the title of Spartiate. This test was not written in books, nor was it spoken of openly. But for a Spartan boy to become a man, he had to prove he was willing to kill without hesitation. Some accounts suggest that this final test was the Crypteia itself. Those who successfully assassinated a Helot would be welcomed into the ranks of the elite. Others say it was a ritual combat, where young warriors were pitted against one another in brutal fights to the death. Regardless of the specifics, one thing was clear: Spartans were expected to kill. Mercy was weakness, compassion was failure, and once they had passed, they were no longer boys. They were Spartans, war machines, warriors with no fear, soldiers bred for one purpose: war. But was this ruthless training system truly the key to Sparta's power? Or was it the beginning of their downfall? Chapter 3: Life in Sparta. The harsh reality behind the glory. The women of Sparta. More powerful than Athenian men? In most ancient civilizations, women were confined to their homes, treated as property, and given little to no education. But Sparta was different. In a shocking contrast to the rest of Greece, Spartan women enjoyed a level of freedom and power that even Athenian men could envy. While Athenian women were expected to be silent and submissive, Spartan women were raised to be strong, outspoken, and physically fit. They trained in athletics, learned how to fight, and even competed in public sports. Why? Because the Spartans believed that strong women would give birth to strong warriors. A weak mother could not raise a strong son, and in Sparta, only the strongest survived. Unlike their counterparts in other Greek city-states, Spartan women could own and inherit land. In fact, they controlled nearly 40% of Sparta's land at one point. They were not expected to do household chores that was left to the Helots, the enslaved population. Instead, their role was to produce future warriors and uphold the ideals of Spartan society. But with power came strict expectations. Spartan women were taught to be ruthless, just like the men. They were known for their sharp tongues and brutal honesty. When a Spartan mother sent her son off to war, she would hand him his shield and say, "Come back with it or on it." Returning without a shield meant surrender and unthinkable disgrace in Sparta. Spartan women were not just wives, they were the backbone of the warrior state. They raised the next generation of soldiers, enforced discipline, and ensured that Sparta remained unbreakable. But their power came at a cost. Love, comfort, and personal freedom were all sacrificed for the survival of the state. The Spartan marriage rituals, a shocking tradition. Even marriage in Sparta was unlike anything seen in the rest of Greece. Love had no place in a warrior society, and the way Spartans formed families was as brutal as their training. A young Spartan man did not simply ask for a woman's hand in marriage, he had to steal her. In a strange and ritualistic practice, Spartan men would abduct their future wives in a symbolic show of strength. The woman's head would be shaved, and she would be dressed in men's clothing before being taken away under the cover of darkness. This act was not an act of violence, but a test both for the man and the woman. The groom would then spend only brief moments with his wife, sneaking out at night to see her until they were officially recognized as a married couple. Why such an unusual ritual? Because Spartans believed that marriage should not weaken a man. A warrior's primary duty was to the state, not to his family. Too much time at home could soften him, distract him from his training. By keeping men in the barracks until the age of 30, Sparta ensured that even their marriages were built on discipline, not love. It was a system designed to produce the next generation of warriors, nothing more. The Spartan diet. A meal fit for a warrior or a punishment. Food in Sparta was not about pleasure, it was about survival. Unlike the feasts and lavish banquets of Athens, Spartan meals were simple, bland, and often revolting. The most infamous dish? Black broth, a dark, almost inedible soup made from pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. This dish was so feared that even visiting Greeks refused to eat it. When a wealthy Athenian once tried it, he reportedly said, "Now I understand why the Spartans do not fear death. But why did they eat such disgusting food? Because luxury was the enemy of discipline. Spartans believed that indulgence made men weak. Their meals were designed to keep them lean, strong, and constantly hungry, forcing them to steal food as part of their survival training in the Agoge. Even outside the Agoge, the diet of an average Spartan remained minimal. Bread, olives, figs, and cheese were the staples of their meals. Meat was rare, and alcohol was consumed in strict moderation. While other Greeks enjoyed fine wine, Spartans would deliberately make their Helot slaves drink excessive amounts of alcohol to show how disgraceful drunkenness was. Food was not meant to be enjoyed, it was fuel for war. The Spartan way of life. A society built on silence and strength, Spartans were not just trained to fight, they were trained to think differently. Unlike the great philosophers of Athens, they did not waste time on long speeches or debates. Instead, they perfected the art of laconic speech, a brutal, direct, and often terrifying way of speaking. The term laconic comes from Laconia, the region of Sparta. It describes a style of speech that was sharp, concise, and to the point. Spartans did not use unnecessary words. They spoke only when needed, and when they did, their words carried weight. One of the most famous examples comes from a confrontation between Sparta and the Persian king Xerxes. When Xerxes demanded that the Spartans lay down their weapons, King Leonidas simply replied, "Molon labe, come and take them." Even when faced with destruction, the Spartans remained cold and unshaken. Another story tells of Philip II of Macedon, who once sent a message to Sparta saying, "If I invade Laconia, I will destroy you." The Spartans responded with a single word, "if." Their culture of silence and discipline made them one of the most feared and respected civilizations in history. But it also made them inflexible, unable to adapt to change. And in the end, it was this same rigid way of life that would lead to their downfall. The harsh reality behind the Spartan glory. Sparta's way of life was extreme, but it was effective. It created a society that valued strength over all else, producing warriors feared across the ancient world. But beneath the surface, it was a system built on suffering. Women were powerful, but their lives were dictated by the needs of the state. Marriage was a duty, not a choice. Food was survival, not enjoyment. Even speech was limited. turning Spartans into soldiers before they could become individuals. For centuries, this way of life kept Sparta strong. But could a society built purely on discipline and war truly last forever? Or was their rigid system doomed to collapse under its own weight? Chapter 4. The Spartan War Machine. The Science of Battle and the Unbreakable Phalanx, the legendary phalanx. An unbreakable wall of shields and spears. At the heart of Sparta's dominance was their unique battle formation, the phalanx. This wasn't just a strategy. It was a fortress of flesh and steel, an impenetrable wall of warriors moving as one. The phalanx was a tightly packed formation where each Spartan locked shields with the men beside him, creating an unbreakable front. Armed with the dory spear, a lambda emblazoned shield, and the deadly Xiphos sword, the Spartans advanced like a human battering ram, crushing everything in their path. Unlike other Greek armies, which often fell apart when chaos erupted, Spartans thrived in the heat of battle. Their phalanx was built on absolute discipline. No man fought as an individual. They moved as a single, unstoppable force. Each warrior was trained to protect the man to his left, knowing that the survival of the unit depended on trust and unity. This strategy made them nearly invincible. A single Spartan warrior was formidable, but an entire army moving in synchronized precision was a nightmare for any enemy. The tighter they pressed together, the harder it was to break their lines. Many enemies who faced the Spartans in battle never even got the chance to swing their weapons. They were crushed under the weight of the phalanx before they could even strike. But what happened if the formation was broken? That's where Spartan discipline came into play. No retreat, no surrender. The Unbreakable Warrior Code. To be a Spartan warrior meant more than just fighting. It meant embracing death as a duty. Unlike other Greek armies, which would sometimes retreat to fight another day, Spartans were forbidden from running. In their minds, there were only two outcomes to battle: victory or death. This belief was drilled into them from birth. A Spartan's shield was his most sacred possession, not just for protection, but because it symbolized unity. When a Spartan mother sent her son to war, she would say, "Return with your shield or on it." This meant that either he returned victorious, carrying his shield, or he was carried home dead upon it. The idea of fleeing a battle was so shameful that Spartans who broke rank or surrendered were ostracized for life. They lost all honor, their families disowned them, and they were branded as cowards, something worse than death in Spartan society. This is why, even when faced with overwhelming odds, Spartans never ran. One of the most famous examples of this warrior code was the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans stood their ground against an army of thousands. Even when they knew death was certain, they fought to the last man. For Spartans, the battle was never about survival. It was about proving their worth as warriors. Weapons and armor, the tools of a Spartan killing machine. While tactics and discipline made the Spartans great, their weapons and armor turned them into lethal killing machines. Every Spartan warrior carried three primary tools of war. 1. The dory spear. This was the primary weapon of a Spartan hoplite, measuring around 7 to 9 feet long. Its iron tip was designed to pierce armor, while the butt spike at the other end could be used if the shaft broke in battle. Spartans would thrust their spears overhand, raining down death from behind their shields. 2. The Xiphos sword. If the dory spear broke, a Spartan switched to his Xiphos, a short, razor-sharp sword perfect for close combat. Unlike the longer swords of other Greek warriors, the Xiphos was compact, designed for quick, brutal stabs in the chaos of battle. 3. The lambda shield, aspis or hoplon. Perhaps the most iconic part of a Spartan warrior's arsenal was his massive bronze-covered shield. This shield was more than just defense, it was the backbone of the phalanx, a weapon in itself. Spartans would use their shields to smash into enemies, break bones, and create space for deadly spear thrusts. The lambda symbol engraved on every Spartan shield stood for Laconia, their homeland, a reminder that they fought not for themselves, but for Sparta. But it wasn't just their weapons that made them deadly, it was their sheer mental and physical preparation. The rituals of war, why Spartans fought with long hair and oiled bodies. Before battle, the Spartans had a ritual unlike any other army. Instead of rushing into war, they would calmly comb their hair, oil their bodies, and sing hymns to the gods. To outsiders, this looked insane. Why would warriors take time to groom themselves before bloodshed? But to the Spartans, this was a psychological weapon. It showed their enemies that they were completely fearless. By preparing for battle with the same discipline as any other daily task, they made it clear they did not fear death. The long hair of Spartan warriors wasn't just for looks. It was a sign of their elite status. Only full-fledged warriors, known as homoioi, were allowed to grow their hair long. It symbolized strength and pride. Before battle, they would comb it out, ensuring they looked calm and composed, even when death was moments away. This ritual was part of their mental warfare. It told their enemies, "We are not afraid, we are Spartans." The unbreakable Spartan war machine, why they dominated the battlefield. For centuries, the Spartan military system was the deadliest force in the ancient world. Their combination of tactics, weapons, and unwavering discipline made them nearly unstoppable. Unlike other Greek armies, which relied on mercenaries and temporary alliances, the Spartans were warriors from birth. Every aspect of their society, from childhood to death, revolved around war. But this brutal system had a weakness. While Spartans could defeat any army in direct battle, their rigid mindset made them unable to adapt to change. They despised new tactics, refused to embrace naval warfare, and believed that their land-based dominance would last forever. In the end, their unyielding nature became their downfall. But at their peak, the Spartans were a force unlike any other. Their tactics inspired future generations of soldiers. Their warrior code became legendary, and their name still echoes in history as the ultimate symbol of discipline, strength, and fearlessness.
Chapter 5: The Battle of Thermopylae.
The truth behind the 300 Spartans. The Battle of Thermopylae remains one of the most famous last stands in history, a moment where bravery met overwhelming odds, and where the Spartans cemented their legacy as the ultimate warriors of the ancient world. But how much of what we know is true? Was it really just 300 Spartans against 1,000,000 Persians? Or is there a deeper, untold story behind this legendary conflict? Leonidas and his warriors. The real story behind their last stand. King Leonidas of Sparta was no ordinary ruler. He was a warrior king trained in the ruthless Spartan Agoge system, forged in battle, and committed to the unwavering code of Spartan honor. When Xerxes, the mighty Persian king, marched toward Greece with an army that some ancient sources exaggerated to over 1,000,000 soldiers, it was Leonidas who stood in his way. But he did not stand alone. Though history romanticizes the idea of only 300 Spartans, the truth is that they were joined by approximately 7,000 other Greek allies. However, when betrayal threatened their position, Leonidas dismissed most of the allied forces, leaving only the 300 Spartans and a small contingent of Thespians and Thebans to fight to the death. What Hollywood got wrong. Separating fact from fiction. The modern retellings of Thermopylae, particularly in films like 300, have created an almost mythical version of events. In reality, the Persian army, while massive, was likely far smaller than the 1,000,000-man force often described. Similarly, the Spartans did not fight bare-chested with perfect physiques under a golden sunset. They wore heavy bronze armor, wielding their deadly dory spears and lambda shields in the tightly packed phalanx formation. And while the sacrifice at Thermopylae was heroic, it was not a battle of pure Spartan dominance. It was a calculated strategic delay to slow the Persian advance. The Persian perspective. What Xerxes and the Persians really saw. To the Persian king Xerxes, the Greek resistance at Thermopylae was baffling. Used to nations surrendering before his vast empire, he underestimated the Spartan will to fight. The Spartans, true to their warrior ethos, fought without fear, using the terrain to their advantage. They slaughtered wave after wave of Persian troops, their phalanx formation proving nearly impenetrable in the narrow pass. But Xerxes had an ace up his sleeve, a Greek trader named Ephialtes, who revealed a secret mountain pass that allowed the Persians to outflank the Spartans. The brutal last stand. how Spartans fought to the death against overwhelming odds. On the final day, Leonidas and his warriors knew they were doomed. They fought with unmatched ferocity, refusing to retreat, killing as many Persians as possible. In the end, they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers, their bodies buried beneath waves of enemy soldiers. Leonidas himself was slain, his body mutilated by order of Xerxes to make an example of the Spartan defiance. But in death, the Spartans achieved something greater than victory. They became immortal legends. The true heroism of Thermopylae. Why it was a strategic victory. Despite their defeat, though the Spartans and their allies perished, their sacrifice was not in vain. The delay they caused allowed the Greek city-states to unite and prepare for the decisive battles to come. Inspired by Thermopylae, the Greeks would later go on to defeat the Persian army at the Battle of Salamis and the Battle of Plataea, ending the invasion. The Spartans' unwavering courage in the face of death became a symbol of resistance, proving that a small, disciplined force could stand against the might of an empire. Chapter 6: The Beginning of the End. The Spartan Decline. For centuries, Sparta stood as an unshakable force, its warriors feared across the ancient world. But no empire, no matter how strong, lasts forever. The beginning of Sparta's downfall was not a single event, but a chain reaction of wars, defeats, and internal decay. From the devastating Peloponnesian War to the catastrophic defeat at Leuctra, the mightiest warrior society in history crumbled, revealing the cracks beneath their iron discipline. The Peloponnesian War. Why their war with Athens destroyed. Both. Sparta's war with Athens, known as the Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE, was a brutal conflict that changed the course of Greek history. It was not just a war of soldiers, it was a battle of ideologies. Athens represented democracy, culture, and naval supremacy, while Sparta embodied oligarchy, military dominance, and land-based power. The war raged for nearly 3 decades, with both sides suffering tremendous losses. Though Sparta eventually emerged victorious, their triumph came at a heavy cost. To win, Sparta allied with the Persians, a move that would have been unthinkable for the warriors who once defied the Persian Empire at Thermopylae. The war left Sparta economically drained and militarily overstretched. The once unbreakable Spartan army had suffered severe casualties, and maintaining control over Greece proved to be far more difficult than conquering it. Victory in the end was just an illusion. The Battle of Leuctra. The shocking defeat that shattered their invincibility. For centuries, Sparta's military supremacy was unquestioned. But in 371 BCE, everything changed. At the Battle of Leuctra, Sparta faced an enemy they had long underestimated, the Thebans, led by the brilliant general Epaminondas. The Thebans introduced revolutionary battlefield tactics, using an oblique phalanx formation that crushed the traditional Spartan battle lines. For the first time in history, the Spartan army was utterly defeated in open combat. The loss at Leuctra was more than just a military defeat. It was the moment the myth of Spartan invincibility shattered. Thousands of elite Spartan warriors fell, and the once mighty state was left vulnerable. The battle also led to the liberation of the Helots, the enslaved population that had been the backbone of Sparta's economy. Without their forced labor, Sparta could no longer sustain itself. Sparta's fall. Why the mightiest warriors fell. After Leuctra, Sparta's power crumbled at an alarming rate. The city-state, once feared by all of Greece, found itself struggling to defend its own borders. Internal strife, a declining population, and the loss of Helot labor drove Sparta into further decline. No longer the dominant force in Greece, they became a shadow of their former selves, unable to reclaim the glory they once held. By the time Alexander the Great rose to power, Sparta was no longer a major player in Greek affairs. They refused to join his campaigns, clinging to their old traditions while the world around them changed. Eventually, Sparta faded into obscurity, a relic of a past age. Sparta did not fall in a single battle. It fell because it refused to adapt. The warrior society that once ruled through sheer force was unable to evolve beyond war, and in the end, it was this rigid mindset that ensured their downfall. Their legacy, however, endures. Even today, the legend of the Spartans remains a symbol of discipline, resilience, and unbreakable will. But behind that legend lies a deeper truth, a reminder that even the greatest warriors can fall, and that no empire, no matter how mighty, is truly eternal. Chapter 7: The Legacy of Sparta, Myths versus Reality. Sparta's legacy has endured for over 2 millennia, shaping how we perceive strength, discipline, and warfare. But was Sparta truly the greatest warrior culture in history, or has time distorted its reality? In this final chapter, we unravel the myths, compare Sparta to Rome, and explore its lasting influence on modern warfare and popular culture. Sparta and Rome are often compared as two of history's most formidable warrior civilizations. While the Spartans excelled in discipline and military training, their rigid society ultimately led to stagnation. Rome, on the other hand, adapted, innovated, and expanded its influence across continents. Unlike Sparta, Rome integrated conquered peoples, built vast infrastructure, and sustained a military machine that lasted centuries. So, who was the superior warrior civilization? While the Spartans lived and died by their code, Rome's adaptability ensured its survival and dominance. Sparta may have set the standard for elite warriors, but Rome's military strategy, engineering, and governance made it the ultimate empire. Beyond history, Sparta's influence reaches deep into modern military training. The grueling discipline of today's special forces, from the Navy SEALs to the Foreign Legion, mirrors the Spartan Agoge system. The philosophy of pushing human limits, embracing hardship, and fostering absolute loyalty to the unit remains a key aspect of military training worldwide. Spartans may be gone, but their ethos lives on in the elite forces that protect nations today. Sparta's mythos has also captured the imagination of the modern world, largely due to pop culture. Films like 300, video games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and countless books have romanticized the Spartan way of life. But how accurate is this portrayal? Hollywood often exaggerates, turning Sparta into a symbol of pure heroism while downplaying its brutal oppression of the Helots and its rigid, inflexible society. The true Sparta was both awe-inspiring and deeply flawed, an empire built on warrior discipline but limited by its inability to change. So why does Sparta continue to inspire us? Perhaps it's the allure of the ultimate warrior lifestyle, the idea of unwavering courage in the face of impossible odds. Maybe it's the simplicity of their philosophy: fight, endure, and never surrender. Or perhaps, in a world filled with distractions and excess, we admire the Spartan way of life because it represents the ultimate test of human resilience. Whatever the reason, the legend of Sparta remains unbreakable, ensuring that their name will never fade from history. Conclusion: the real meaning of Spartan greatness. The Spartans were more than just warriors. They were a society built on discipline, sacrifice, and an unbreakable code of honor. Their legacy has endured for over 2,500 years, inspiring countless generations. But was their way of life truly admirable, or was it a brutal system of control? Their discipline was unmatched, their training was relentless, and their victories were legendary. But in the end, even Sparta fell. So, what does that tell us? Was their strength their greatest asset, or their greatest weakness? Now, I want to hear from you. Would you survive in Spartan society? Do you think their extreme discipline was the key to their greatness, or the cause of their downfall? Let's discuss in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the real Spartans fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. What part of Spartan history shocked you the most? Let's keep the conversation going.